Hello, everybody, and welcome to another part of our Muses of Delphi series. I believe this is Building Dioramas, episode 4 overall. And you saw us building this thing, and I will be making YouTube videos out of some of the painting of these. Let's see if I can give you a little more of a focus here on some of the stuff that's going to be closer. I think that's going to be better. So we've got all 9. And remember this one here, she's going to go up here where you can see that little hole is drilled right there. We do have to paint this. We're going to be pinning these guys here as well, just so that things don't break apart as much. I'm not going to show you the process of drilling these out and sticking them in because, well, let's just say that that's more of a delicate process and time consuming than we have here. Now I am going to have to show you how we'll cover up some of this. And overall, we're not going to do a lot of colorful painting on this, to say the least. We're going to use a couple of our contrast here. We're going to be using some Reaper paints. And as you see by our reference picture right here, and let's go make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. That's more what we're looking at here. No bright colors or anything like that because, well, that's what the figures are for. That's where the color is supposed to be. We also have object source lighting. That's going to show up easier or better if we don't screw around with a lot of extra colors. We are also going to be adding some foliage here. We got Green Stuff World. We've got Warlord Games. More Green Stuff World. We have Gamer's Grass over here. So we're going to be using a mix of products. I'm going to try and use a little bit of the Woodland Scenics foliage here. Again, this has to be shipped. So sometimes you just got to maybe sacrifice a little bit of an effect for safety's sake. I don't know if that's quite the term. Now, I did want to see if it was possible to get some ivy or some kind of plants on our... here we go. So we got Wicked Elf miniatures right here. I might try one of these vines. It'll be an experiment. I have no idea if it's going to work. Hopefully it does. We're going to find out the hard way. Or at least we'll find out one way or another. I just want to say it's the hard way. Now remember, these guys come off. Just gonna move this gently here, but around here, I'm gonna use the brush to point. So areas like this is a little bit easier. I can just sort of pile up the oxide paste or the sandy paste or the earth paste or whatever paste it is. I can pile it up more easily here. This is a little bit more difficult. So I have to, if I'm going to have this stuff piled up around there, I'm going to also have to continue this out a little bit. I'm thinking that's where maybe there's some leaves too. So we're going to try and do some of our cut leaves here. Again, Green Stuff World leaf cutters. We're not going to get, like I said, we're not going to get super elaborate with the painting process here because it's going to be covered over with the letter foliage. It's also going to be covered over with the object source lighting right here. We want to make this have a glow to it and this be that central thing. Even though there's all these other characters going on, we want to have some kind of... It's not going to be super... Not going to be here. Let's... I think that's about where those characters are going to be because I want this one far enough away. I don't necessarily want it to be affected so much by that glow over there. We'll put a little bit of it on the end of the dress here, but that's going to happen when all of this is together. So what I'm going to do in the next segment here is we'll get some of our paints out on the palette, and we're just going to focus on getting some darks here early on. I don't think we're actually going to work too much with our columns here at first. We'll let those off to the side. We also take our characters off of here. I've taken a picture of it so I know pretty much where they go because sometimes you forget. And we are not going to show every last brushstroke on this because it'll be kind of similar. I do want to show what happens with some of the object source lighting here, which, now that I'm thinking about it, might actually have to wait until they are glued on. So that might just wait a little bit. So let's get back to our palette over here. remember these guys. That's where these guys go in here so that you don't just knock this over, spill it all over the place. At $8 a container, we're going to be using some of our larger brushes, of course. Here we've got a number 12 round. I do have some even larger brushes here. We do have some flat brushes if it comes down to it. Yeah, there's your number 12 round. So what we'll do, and I was tempted to use weathering powders to paint this here with the pigment fixer and such. We'll see how far we can get with regular paint first. So let's get that paint out on the palette and let's get some shading on here. Let's dive in here and really start with areas that we know are going to have to be darker here. Got some brown liner over here. Also, we've got this Gore Gruntifer that we're going to mix with Leviathan Blue, and that's actually going to make a really dark color too. Just look at how, I mean, that is just unbelievably dark right there. That's good. Using the big old brush here, and as always, we are going to start changing that color around. Back here, I don't want to, it's that same age-old thing of you don't necessarily want to call attention away from your central focus, and that's what we want to do here is get some shape. Yes, we do. We also don't want to just carry the eye away from where it's supposed to rest, and as always, some of these rocks are going to fall off. It's inevitable. Don't forget we're going to have a lot of our green flock here as well. And some of the Luke's APS materials, remember, some of those basing materials. It's just like the last basing video where the kind of fair amount of stuff was actually falling off, and as far as the rocks and such, didn't really matter. Was not a big deal because eventually it was all just covered up. The rocks are here for the texture, not necessarily for their colors, if that makes any sense for you. I think you can see already the difference that this makes. I'm not going to put paint here because obviously we've got figures that are going to go there. I think this is the other reason I didn't want to get into painting a whole lot of just bright colors and other such things on the mosaic tile here, because with the way the figures were, and they're still on those, and I'm always just going to call them broccoli bases, I knew that I was going to cover up a lot of this anyway, potentially with all the paste and everything. Actually, what I'd like to do is see, instead of necessarily using the paste, I'd like to actually emphasize more of some of the Luke's APS stuff. And can it remove that ridge line that's going to be there when we just kind of place figures like the one right here that's got that broccoli base on it? Well, you know, it's got that rounded lip, and I don't know if the Luke's APS stuff would be enough to maybe hide that. Again, just a mix of the wildwood, just mixing a lot of different things together. I'm tempted to go back here and put maybe a little bit of color on some of this here, and it's just a few places, almost like a, dare I say, a bit of a dry brush there. If it is, it will be minimal. I thought that is another thing that could be interesting for you to see, is just how do you paint some kind of a worn, weathered away mosaic. I haven't really done anything like that myself, actually, so it's going to be new for all of us potentially. So again, that rock fell out, whatever. Is it really, is it that tragic that we're missing one rock? I don't think so. We got a lot of flower tufts that are going to go in here. Just working our way around. This is actually, I think it's one of the GW shades or something like that. It's the camo shade green or something, which not a bad thing to add to our grays over here. If we feel the need for it as well, we can do a thing with our sponges here. Could take some of this away, especially where we've got maybe some of the statuary or whatever. So we can take some of that away. Look, it's removing a fair amount. Now let's get that gore grunta. Or is this? Yeah, it's gore grunta. Just throw this in our little container here. Again, mixing it with the Leviathan blue really gives you a nice, deep, rich tone. I think one of the other reasons I wanted to use the contrast up is that it would sink down into the crevices here as far as acrylic paints goes and that sort of capillary action. Obviously, nowhere near the oils. And like I said, I was tempted. I could have used the Green Stuff World Intensity inks as well. Let's see. I'm gonna see if I've got one here. No, that one is not the one I'm looking at. Let's see. So that's another deep green, but this one is more of a. I'll mix this Phoenix orange. Let's just throw this out here. Wow, look at that. Oh my goodness. I just wanted to mix it with our blue and see what happened. Never know unless you try. Oh wow. Yeah, that's nice. Ooh, look at the intensity of that rich dark. So yeah, Green Stuff World Intensity inks. A lot of different things you can use. Nice rich darks here. We're almost all the way around the back of this here. Initially, I wanted to have the green glow be more dominant. The more I thought about it, the more I said, no, maybe it really shouldn't be quite so dominant. All of these are the same kind of changes that you have to make. You can't be held prisoner by the initial plan. Remember, that's in the Book of Wapol now. Don't be held prisoner by the plan. We're just, again, getting some of our darker stuff there. I think we've got most of the base itself covered, which then leaves us with, here, let's get a little bit of the wildwood here. I'm just going to hit some of this. You can see how that, yeah, I'm kind of liking the way that brings out what's there. With so much foliage and overgrowth on this, if I were to, and if you go back to, I think it was the Hydra, where we did it was object source lighting. It was on the mosaic tile floor. Oh, actually, that one's not glued on there. Boy, that was sticking on there pretty good for something that wasn't glued on. Okay, I'll just get you off to the side here. I was wondering about that. Okay. And what I will do is I'm going to actually let this have a chance to dry here. And I'm going to, in the interim, drill some holes for things like the figures, for our columns. Yeah, if there's just too much, like these faces right here, if there's too much going on color-wise there, and we start putting down all the foliage and everything, it's gonna be a challenge for the eye to be able to absorb all that. Because remember, the figures themselves have a fair amount of color on them, and that's kind of where we would like the focus to end up. However, that's not too bad. Plus, I there was a part of me that really did want more of a nighttime, moonlit feel to this. So I think the darker this is, at least we'll get somewhat closer, maybe, to that feel. Okay, I think that takes care of. There we go. All right. So we are going to let this dry. We're going to drill some holes, get that taken care of. And next, we're going to put some lighter colors on here, and maybe even start to think about what's going to happen with our columns over here. And we're going to do that next. Those darker glazes are in place. And we also positioned some of these guys with their pins. Let's try for a few lighter colors here. Just take these guys out of their slots. We have some maiden flesh here, maggot white, and sepia liner. I'm going to just turn the brightness down a little bit on this. Let's make sure that you have a decent focus on that. Now I think I might even start to put hints of the fluorescent green out here, maybe. First priority though is we're going to take some of our maiden flesh. We are going to mix it mostly with colors that are already out here. I'm going to grind that paint into the brush. It's not a dry brush, but we do have ourselves a nice filbert. It's don't necessarily really need this flat brush right here. It's kind of interesting. Okay, let's see what we can do here now. Again, just gonna dust this over the top. But I don't want it to be a dry brush, because if it is, it's going to leave that telltale grainy texture behind. So we'll do this at a minimal level here. Go back and get some more. And I'll shift the color too, so you can see I grabbed a little bit more of that sepia liner. At this point, my main interest is just bringing out some of the mosaic, just the shape of it at this point. I can always go back in here maybe with some colors. I'm thinking if I do that, a little bit of the blue, a little bit of the red, maybe some yellows, and avoid the greens like I have used on past occasions when I painted these mosaic tiles here. The blues wouldn't be too bad, even some of the reds. Here's a little bit of the maggot white this time. Yeah, the blues and reds not too bad because we also have figures with those colors on them. So I think there's a precedent, I guess, at least for those colors. I'm going to go maybe a little bit more even with the sepia liner as we start to work our way around the... Yeah, let's get a little bit more of our sepia color just in this general area here. Also have to think of stuff like the columns as being maybe a little bit stained. Speaking of the columns here, so this is where I grabbed some of that contrast paint that's been just kind of lounging around there, and now we're going to use that on some of the broken column bits here. I think those for sure want to have some stains on those. Here's our broken pieces that we attached. Back to that maiden flesh again, mixing it. See, look at that, it's got a reddish tint to it now. And I think, yes, I think you can see that. So we're going to go a little bit lighter here. But then as we go over here, see, it just sort of fades away. Same over here. Kind of thinking this broken area maybe, where it's the most broken, that's where we'll fade out some of the lights and such. Now we'll get the rest of our. It's not exactly nuclear physics right here, but you do want to have just a little bit of attention to changing up those colors now and then, just a little bit. We also want to get some paint on our columns. See, we've got our faces down over here. And I might go back in if I really feel like I have to get some more precision in whatever lights and darks are on that. I can do that too. But these brushes can just absolutely get creamed. It's unbelievable the damage. Look at it's even have a wider filbert brush right now. That is fantastic. Let's not get again. If it does get too light, I'll do some glazes over it, or potentially, let's say I just go, oh man, I really don't like this color here. Well, that's where I just put more flower tufts or grass tufts or some kind of foliage material, and I just cover it up. Why spend the extra time trying to repaint something when you could just cover it up with some flowers? Which at this point would make it actually look more overgrown, as opposed to trying to really paint some kind of precise details in something that really shouldn't have those details anyway. Again, what is your main focus? There's 9 figures on here that we spend a fair amount of time painting, and it just makes no sense whatsoever to detract from those, as opposed to have the whole base. That's what dioramas are about. It's telling a story. It's telling a story, and it's also trying to keep your audience looking at what you want them to. Now, see here, I did add a little touch of water to that, make it flow a little bit easier. Again, we are trying to avoid that kind of dry brush look. We have plenty of. Look at this. We'll just really smash the paint into that brush. Let's take a little bit of it onto these columns before we move on to the freestanding columns, if we want to call them those. We are getting there rapidly. Oh, I thought that was a rock. That's actually a piece of broken column. I'm even going to use my finger to do a little blending there. Another column chunk there. Those are the gamer's grass pieces that we used. I'll link the first tutorial to this, so you don't have to go hunting for it. It's going to be in the description, as always. When I talk about links, they're in the description. It's basically something that I learned over the last few years with YouTube, is that there's an awful lot of stuff that goes into the descriptions of YouTube videos. It was helpful to learn that. Let me get some of these guys out of the way here. Bring out my columns. Once again here, let's get a little bit of our You know, I can actually zoom in on this because they are smaller. I think we're about there. Let's make sure they are in focus. And here, away we go. Again, trying to take advantage of that large surface area of the brush. I want to say these bristles, they seem, in some ways, they are a bit softer than, say, the green handle craft brushes. Yeah, these also came from Hobby Lobby. So we're trying to keep that dark staining up there. And now for our column base, we will go lighter than this for sure. Not necessarily going to do the final painting on every single column. I want to make sure we have enough time for, because the critical stuff, the stuff that's really going to be a challenge, because still, even now, I'm not entirely 100% thinking, okay, this is exactly what's going to happen. I have general ideas. There's no way I will know until we actually get the figures on there and we see just what is possible. Okay. There we are. I'm going to get some more of my maggot white out here, which is that more bluish white, bluish off-white, I should say, from Reaper. Always thinking about changing a touch of that wildwood. I think that gives it a more neutral type of a color. And our the sculpted fluted columns here, that seemed to work well, and especially now that we're bringing out our sculpted texture that much more with our shading and painting. There we are. I guess I'm trying to save myself from some disappointment here. Well, let's say we do that ivy stuff, the vines, and it just doesn't, or whatever. I can anticipate. Let's say I can anticipate some glue maybe going in areas where I don't necessarily want it to go. That could very well happen. And there might have to be some repainting of areas. That's also possible. I may absolutely not think that is appropriate there and maybe have to tear it off, in which case there will be definitely some repainting to be done. Fortunately, we used brush on primer, or primer that can be brushed on, so no problem there. It's not like we're going to have to cover up all the other stuff that we did just because of one part of it that didn't work out maybe the way we had wanted it to. And this is nowhere near light. We really don't want these columns to be white after all. The maggot white is not white, and you can see we are nowhere near maggot white yet. But look at what this brush can do here with the using it on the side here. And this brush actually does cost less than the gray handled or green handled craft brushes. Trying to emphasize a few of the areas where there's some breaks in the columns. Back to a little bit more of our maggot white here. Once all the characters are in there, the vellum butterflies, you have seen those already, so if I put those on here, that may not be part of the video. It kind of depends on just how much time there is, if there's time to show it. But I'm imagining the part where we're getting the miniatures on here and some other things where that's going to make things a little interesting. It's a little bit lighter here. Maybe the tiniest touch of water to make sure that flows pretty well. And then we also want to paint some cracks into these. And you can see this, I think this is a good illustration of just how not a dry brush this is. I think you can actually see the wet paint on there. Yeah, you can look at that. I think you could see, yeah, you can see the paint sort of glistening on that. Not a dry brush. It does really help to keep us away from that telltale texture. You can see it from a million miles away. And I don't mean to denigrate the dry brush or anything like that, but it's not quite, it's not as necessary. I realize it can be a convenient way to go, but there's ways to get a little bit beyond just the dry brush and make it a little bit more damp. Like here, I just took some actual, just a little water to make that flow just a touch more. A little bit more maggot white in some places here. And you notice where I've got this concentration of the darker colors sort of on top of the column, and then in the middle it gets a little bit lighter. I'm just trying to keep in mind some form of weathering maybe. And I'm really trying to avoid any kind of actual white here. That could be a little bit too stark. Especially for the amount of foliage and overgrowth that we want to have on this. I think we have to go with a bit more of a stained look. Once again, a bit more towards our lighter tone here. And then, okay, let's maybe take a little smaller brush here. Let's think about doing some kind of cracks or something on here. So I'm just going to grab one of my sable type brushes. We'll grab a little bit of where's my brown liner here. Get some more that we pretty much used it all up in the initial phases. Where did you, there you are. Okay. Maybe not quite that dark. Maybe not that dark. And let's just, it's almost a bit like chipping. And then look at that. See, there's a nifty little crack that just sort of radiates out. Even here, if I do too much of it, and then I put all the vines and other greenery onto there, why did I spend the time to paint all these little cracks in there, only to just cover them up with foliage? Now this one, here, see, we'll just have that. And actually, I like to sort of connect the dots a bit here, because yeah, maybe the cracks should almost be connected, I think. All of this, just some brown liner, nothing very special whatsoever. Now we've got ourselves a nice big old crack here. or some breaks. Let's see if we can't even here. I'm starting to think about some shading there. So what I'm going to do is I'll just kind of close this segment out here with some more of the painting the cracks on these columns. And as far as the painting phase goes, we'll end the painting phase with an attempt to add some colors to the mosaic part of this. So we're sort of staining this now. So we're taking the brown liner here, and we're just doing some downward strokes here. Look at that, just some very simple staining. Maybe it emerges from the cracks in the marble there too. I think we've got a smaller column. Let's, in the time that's left, play with this one. Again, take the top here and just, not everywhere, not absolutely everywhere, but do some of those little streaks. We got a whole bunch of chipped away bits right here. And you can see I'm going back, get some water. That helps to keep those from becoming too dark. It's not like chipping on a vehicle or something like that, where you're chipping away some paint. It's a wee bit different. Trying to make these some semblance of realism out of these cracks here. As with anything, too much can be too much. And it doesn't take a lot for them to just be a little overwhelming. There's another instance where we got a big old crack here. I want to just automatically fill that with darker shading. And we'll reinforce some of our lines here. And now what I'm going to do, it felt like I needed some shading here. So we change that. Still take some of that away. But it felt like it needed that. And now we've got very quickly a little extra shading there. We sculpted that in. Why not at least use the shape that we actually sculpted in there to begin with? This most definitely needs some cracks rating out of it. It's not going to be terribly easy. The shape of it does make it a little more difficult, I think, to carry these cracks out. So let's just have it go horizontally where I've got a little more surface to work with. And I think we are all good now. Yeah. Might just have a crack sort of emanate from down here. We'll have it maybe join with this crack over here. You could even potentially, let's just throw a little bit more of our maggot white out here. And if you, I guess, wanted to emphasize those cracks even more, maybe not quite so light. So what we'll do is we will give those a touch of a highlight here. And again, too much of that could really spoil, or just call too much attention to it, I suppose. Maybe that's the word I should use. Let's get a bit of an edge highlight over here where some of our marble's been broken away. And this is a way for a crack that was not sculpted in there to suddenly have depth. And I don't know how many times in years past where I sculpted in something like that, like a crack or whatever, which it was really fun to sculpt it in. Then when it came time to paint it, I sort of realized that, oh my goodness, maybe that's just a little bit too big. There was nothing I could do about it by then. If you're painting on a lot of those cracks and they look a little bit too big, well, you just paint them away. It's way easier doing that than trying to say uh, resculpt something. That's never fun. Resculpting something that you spent a lot of time on, especially, and not fun. So there we have it. It's starting to match a lot of the colors that we've got on the rest of the diorama. Feeds in pretty well with some of the way that shading goes. So I'm going to do is the other columns here. And I said, we'll go back into this. We'll see if we can get a hint of blue here and there, maybe a hint of red, something like that to just give this a little color, maybe not quite so flat with our various shades of gray. And we'll be right back with that next. Let's see if we can't sneak in some color on our mosaics, and I mean just a little bit of color here. So we have out on our palette just basically red, yellow, blue. Throw a little bit more of the maggot white out there too so we can lighten this up. I'm going to start here. Touch of this blue. We're going to give it a little bit of that maggot white to lighten it up a bit. And typically these areas right here is where I go with the almost like they're waves of some kind, but we're going to give this a very light touch. So we're really light touch, but we don't necessarily, I mean, that is a very light touch. Now if you check out those other videos where we're painting the mosaic bits like this, this was very thoroughly shaded with the blue here. I'm really just trying to do a minimal amount here, as little bit as I can. It's basically a hint of color here, and that is it. That is all we want to do. Not much more than that. Focusing on these areas, like I said, I think, yeah, okay, you can see that. And this is the other benefit of the clear paints from Reaper, is that it's easy to do that as I like to just call it a dry glaze. Well, there's a hint of color to it. It's somewhat translucent, but not watered down. Not watered down at all. I think we've got look at that tiny bit what that does. Look at the impact that little bit had on the overall look of this. That's what I mean, where it can be too much in a big hurry. Let's do something in here, maybe, to show this as a pattern of some type. Again, keeping things simple. Also remember, there's going to be miniatures sitting on top of this, which could wipe out virtually all of what we just did here. So as you can see, I'm just going to do the same over here. I'm taking this row of a couple of tiles here. It's almost in the form of a cross-like shape, but keeping that as muted as possible. We've got another one of those over here. I could even potentially use white as a fourth color, and by white I mean just pick out a few tiles. And I think we actually even did that with the mosaic tiles on the object source light piece with the Hydra on it. Going to go a little bit further into these corners here. Boy, wow, that does not take much. And I'm trying to be as minimalist as I can with this. And as I just look up at the screen, I said, wow, that is showing up way more than I really expected. All right, what is, let's throw a little bit of texture there. What the heck, we'll just do the same here. Even though there's going to be a character standing there, so a whole bunch of that's going to be covered up anyways. Now, this is where it gets interesting because blue, well, that's subtle enough. And now if we're going to go in here, I'm going to go in here with maybe some of the yellow, and we're taking a little bit of the sepia liner here to make sure that doesn't get too noticeable too fast. And you can see we're just going to hold that brush on its side, but gentle brush strokes again. Very gentle brush strokes. The idea is that this is just sun bleached, whatever it is. It's so weathered you barely see the color anymore. I think I'm glad I at least did this much. And remember, we also have potentially object source lighting to think about. So already big difference. It's such a big difference for so little. And an area, like, see here, I'm just going to cover that up there. There's either going to be a figure standing on it, or there's going to be some kind of, what would you say, foliage, tuft, whatever to cover that now. I'm going to take some of the sepia here. We're graying down that red. Yes, it's red, but it's been grayed down a little bit, and now yeah, let's see how I just sort of lose track. I don't necessarily paint every single one of these tiles here. Also, the benefit of having these nice big old craft brushes. Get sneaking a little bit of faded red here. That the color itself is muted. We're also using just such a light brush stroke here. Such a light brush stroke. Okay. Gonna look at some other areas to get in a touch of this. Again, a very muted red. Keeping that very muted. Oh yeah, let's do something kind of in between here with this. Mirror that over here and over here. So essentially now we're taking a little bit of sepia, and we're going to work on a couple of these borders right here. It also makes, see, now this is not necessarily so light. That's why I didn't worry about how if it looked a little bit light when I was just giving it some of those, what looked like a dry brush. Look at how subtle that is. That is really subtle, but man, does it have an impact. So I'm pretty happy with that. I will even jot down a little bit there. I'll continue with this. I didn't actually expect to be using this much of the sepia, except maybe to tone down other things. I didn't really expect it to be part of, say, the designs like this. And I'm extra glad that I just didn't even think about using the green, because with all the foliage that's going to be on here, that just would have been a mistake. But I have to avoid the tempt. I'm really tempted to get some decent, okay, maybe we'll take a touch of a deeper red in just a couple of places, maybe on, I just was calling these the roundels. So we'll give some of these maybe a bit of darker color there. Just a hint of it. See, I can, look at this, I can put this on here and then wipe away the excess. Put some of this on here. Yeah, wipe away the excess. Where are we? Let's grab a little bit more of this red here, and maybe, now, I was tempted, so tempted to do that, but I'm just going to maybe throw in this, maybe less of a red and more of a, like a sienna type of a color here. And as that intertwines through, I think, yeah, that's going to give it a little more interest there. Potentially maybe here. And then what I just might do is hit these little end caps here in the intersection parts. So it really didn't take a whole lot to, now of course this is maybe, if it's going to be a broken floor like this, this is probably the approach you might want for your mosaic tiles every single time, is to do a more subtle thing like this. Very light, a suggestion of colors, as opposed to kind of the mosaics that we did, again, on that Hydra one, where it was, we really did bring out some of the mosaic very thoroughly there. Okay, well, back to my sepia over here. Oh, okay. I just noticed we've got a place there that could probably use a little bit of red. And then, okay, let's see. I'm actually brightening up this red a bit. And maybe I just do a few of these. Not even necessarily everywhere. I'm gonna look up to see. Yeah, we even that little bit is starting to move into the territory where it's starting to kind of show up a bit. I don't want it to show up too much. Also, probably not a bad idea. Just sort of wait and see what the figures look like. And remember, all this could be covered up completely by object source lighting, by columns. So sometimes the wait and see is better. Will it be more difficult potentially to paint some of that. Let's say if there's a figure in the way, it certainly could become more difficult. But I think we're going to stop there. Another thing we could do is potentially. Oh, let's get our columns on here first. I almost started sticking miniatures on there. So first the columns. I think our second one goes here. This one over here. So straight away, where's my? I know I've got, there it is. I know I got a hole drilled there. So already we've covered up some of it. Now some of our miniatures here. We've got our pins in there. Where was she going to go? I think something along that kind of a line. I'm just looking for ones that are going to impact what we've painted here. Huh. Okay, I'm going to put some foliage over there. I want to make sure I got enough space here. We're going to grab ourselves a pin vise. I do believe that's where this goes. So just going to drill a hole here. Okay. Reason drill the hole. Couple reasons. Aside from it having to be shipped, it's look, there's a depression in there, so there's not really a good place for any sort of glue anyways. All right, so there's our violinist, so to speak. Actually, I don't necessarily like where that went. I'm going to move it. I don't know if I necessarily want to move it that much, but here, let's show you the. I mean, it's a little hole. If I don't like it there, I just cover it up with some greenery. Here, let me try and brush some of that away so I can see where the heck that hole is. That's better. Okay, I like that more because I would like you to see some of the face. Now I'm going to change my focus here. I'm going to zoom in a bit for you. Where is another obvious one? An easy to place one, which is going to be right here. Okay. Now, right there was just easy enough to pop through the Sculpey, but look what we did here. So see how the broccoli base is sort of joining with that? Here, let me focus that again for you. So it's really just joining right there. It means I have a little less covering to do. Okay, and now we've got we have this lady over here. She's going to be back here. I'm going to set her out over here. I think maybe even closer to the edge. So I just kind of give that a little bit of a push. That sort of gives me a bit of a depression to work with. Got our hole here. All right. Down she goes. And then this is going to be the big question is these ladies right here. So she's going to go here again. She's kind of shielding herself from the glow of that. I'm going to actually have her be even closer to that column because maybe then we'll put some of that light on the column. Yeah, okay, so right about here. So give that up. Oh, and here's another thing too. Okay, so I just dipped that in a little bit of a white paint there. And then I just set it here, and look, I think, yeah, you can even, on the camera, you can see that white dot there. It's another little strategery tactic type thing there. Now this, though, I'm going to have to not brush that off because, well, I'll just be brushing white paint around and we don't want that. Okay, that's not too shabby. What is going to happen with her where she's kind of hiding herself? Here, let's give that a dot of white paint. Just stick that right over here. We'll get our pin vise. Drill our hole. And down she goes. Okay. There we have it. And oh, look. Even when I tilt this, you can still see things. Or they don't fall off. I'm going to go back out a bit here. Now, do I... Yeah, you know what? I am actually going to try and dust in a little bit of my fluorescent green here with a few minutes that are left. And boy, does this going to have to be very, very, very subtle. And I mean super, very subtle. I can always add more later. Just taking off some more. Let's see, how much do we want to put? Let's see that. That's all it is. It almost doesn't seem like it's registering there, but it actually is. I'm going to take this off now. And again, another reason why I just didn't add too much color to this, because we're sort of adding a lot of color to it now with our little hint of object source lighting. And this, another challenge here that I can see is that I need to glue this in place. As much as I'd like to paint this on right now, this would need to be glued in place because I could just paint it somewhere and go, oh, I just painted the wrong side of it. That would be unfortunate. That would be most unfortunate. Okay. And remember, too, any kind of foliage that I put here, I'm also going to have to hit that with some object source lighting. Now, I think I like the fact that there's a little bit of that crack facing towards the figure there, so I will hint at a little bit of the lighting here, which will eventually get a little bit more illuminated. Okay, it's real subtle. I mean, there's not much in the way of green on that. Let's see, where is my... Just looking for the hole right there. All right, you know what? I might just do it then. Okay. All right, as long as it's not glued in. Here, let's, now you can see it. We'll just hit this with some of our green. If need be, I can just paint over it. It's another reason why I didn't paint these columns with a lot of white, because now any sort of lighting shows up. And I think you can see, yeah, you see that little hint of green? It's a hint of green. It's not overwhelming. This is the advantage of the fluorescent paint, of course. All right, we've got that going pretty well. Put you back in place. I'm so tempted here. I think I'm going to put a little bit more on this. So what I am going to do, now this is going to be off camera here. I'm going to have to glue these figures in. We're not going to glue her in just yet. Not just yet. because that one I don't want to be snapping that one off. And I might even have to ship it with her not being attached to all that. All the buyer's got to do is literally just stick that pin right into the slot where it's meant to go. And that might be a little bit of a case of better safe than sorry. I'm going to extend this up a bit just because of how high she's holding that in her hand. And now here I will, oof, I added a little bit of the maggot white. Is that going to be too much? I don't believe it is. No, I don't think so. Don't think it is. Put this back over here. All right. All right, so what we're going to do is, like I said, we are going to glue some of these in, some of our ladies here, and we'll put just a hint of some paste around them, but I'm thinking more of again, the Luke's APS material, more stuff like, who knows, maybe even some of this. Yeah, so I think, yeah, and right here, again, instead of trying to paint that in, I'm just going to cover that with some tufts or whatever. Yeah, we have a lot of tufts to put on here, that's for sure. Lots of tufts and flock and other type of things. And we'll be right back with that next. So we have a whole ton of stuff arrayed out here. We have our texture here. I'm going to just adjust the focus here so we don't crush the figures trying to get it towards the focus. There we go. That's your Vallejo texture there. We have the tufts from Gamer's Grass. And we've got our Warlord tufts. We've got Green Stuff World tufts. We got tufts everywhere. We've got this foliage from Green Stuff World. We got a whole bunch of stuff. And we got these from Luke's APS right here. We're going to try some combinations of these guys. Oh, look, we have some leaves here that we do with our leaf cutters here, again from Green Stuff World. Now, we would definitely save these for another segment right here. These are the Wicked Elf. Yeah, we'll a whole different segment for those because we got to paint them and do some other things. So we'll leave these guys off to the side for later because we got a whole bunch of stuff to do here now. So I'm just going to set aside. I'm not even going to bother really showing the leaf cutting thing because I've got tons. Well, maybe I'll just show that a little bit briefly. But first thing we've got to do before there's any tufts, before there's anything else, I actually did want to show you a little bit of a trick here that I've done in the past. Done this in the past. Okay. I'm going to keep the palette out here, actually. And you know what? I'll actually just throw it a little bit more of the sepia liner here. Where's my brown liner? Here we go. So I've got these couple of liner paints out here, and what we're actually going to do is mix those with our paste. We don't need a ton of it. And this is something you can do. It's just fine. I know I've done it before. I'm not sure if you've ever seen this happen, so I thought this could be interesting. Now here I'm going to get a little different color going. Because remember, we're not necessarily priming over this. So here we are. We got kind of a greenish color, more of a brown color. I don't want to thin that down too much, otherwise we're just going to lose all of its holding power. And I think we're good to go. Basically, it kind of gives it a greenish hint. You know what? I might just throw in a little bit more of the brown liner over here. Darken that down some more. Okay. That's a little better. And I will use, I think, a somewhat thinner brush here, smaller brush. I've got a ton of basically beat up liner brushes that aren't necessarily good for a whole lot anymore. And when they reach that stage, like here, this one's a little worse for wear. And I might even chuck a dot or two of the Luxe APS glue. Gives it a bit more holding power when we go to throw some flock or whatever on top of it here. Okay. Gonna move my light out of my way here. I'm gonna make sure we've got enough focus for you to see what's going on here. It's kind of important. There. Is it a perfect match to the colors that are there? Well, not really, but then that's not exactly what I'm after either, because we are going to be throwing some other stuff, other materials in there. So this is probably, even this with the foliage and stuff, it's going to be a multi-step process here. We're not going to squeeze this all into one segment. That would not be terribly good. All right. Want to make sure I get some, especially piled on a couple of these, like this one here. This is what I want it right next to the face of that. Okay. And I'm even going to take a bit of a different color over there and mix that with it. But remember, all of this stuff we're mixing in, it does start to weaken the overall hold or the shape of this thing, the shape that it can hold. This one in particular is a very steep cliff off of it, so we're really trying to blend that out here onto the mosaic. Does it wipe out some of the mosaic tile? Yes, it does. But that's okay. So that, and I can put another layer here. I just want to get this position. Okay, hopefully you can see what's going on. These here, it's going to be the same thing. And now you know why we spent a little less time painting the mosaic tile stuff, because, well, I knew this was about the only way to do it, because there was just no way to shave these off of the base. You've seen me do it a bunch of times with the razor saw, but it was not feasible here. It was not feasible, and I had to just think of some other way of doing that. That's why I wanted it to be as overgrown as it was, because I thought, okay, this mostly hides the little cliff edge, but then what's going to hide this? It's like, oh, sorry. It's like layers of hiding stuff. Yeah, it's going to be tough for me to get this exactly positioned for you. And I apologize for that, because it's more important for me not to drop this, because that would be super unfortunate. All right, so that blends that out a little bit there. We need to do the same over here. So instead of necessarily trying to paint this, the idea is I gave it some kind of a color initially right away. And then I'm going to try and use all of the different flocks and other things that we have to try and cover that up. maybe even some rocks. And this is where actually the Luke's APS rocks this might be one of the first times I'm using them, maybe for the purpose that they were originally sort of intended, and that is kind of as a standalone thing, not something to be painted, but as a finishing product. That's another reason why I thought I would give this a shot. And again, another reason why I put some glue in here so that it might actually get some hold onto that. Here I'm going to boost that light a bit. Definitely glad that I gave this some color here. And I will definitely have to go back in and do touch-up things, stuff that, as you can tell, probably just impossible to do on camera. There's things that I would have liked to have done without having to put the figures on the base first. That was unfortunately not really feasible. At some point, they had to go on there and make things a bit tougher. There was kind of no way around that. This one really going to have to pile this stuff up here. I might even do a few around the columns. That also, the other effect that might have is, I guess the figures wouldn't be so, it's like, well, okay, they have all these little mounds around them. How come the columns don't? The other thing I wanted to maybe hide it with was, say, some of the leaves. Piles of leaves. Now, I don't know if I'd want piles of leaves up against the figures, because they'd really be standing there a long time to have a pile of leaves built up around their legs. So that maybe not so much, but the leaves, yeah, I think that's very possible. And just again, touch of that Luke's APS glue in there, looking for some extra hold. Now mix this all together. Might even throw a little bit more of some of my dark brown in here. Just make that darker. Again, too much is going to just really weaken it. However, we got ourselves a nice brown mix there. And there we go. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I spread some of it out here even. Then it's even less of a intrusion. Got to really pile it up on this one here. I know that's tough to see, and I apologize for that, but there was really nothing else for it. Now this is around here is where I'd be tempted to really put one of those kind of a tree branch type things, some of the woodland scenics type foliage. However, I think this is where I'm just going to basically plant some of those. I think this is probably the one diorama where I'm going to use that stuff the most. And if this did not have to be shipped, I would definitely be using more of the Wicked Elf plants, like the ferns and such. But in order to keep some of this stuff from snapping, I'm going to have to quite literally pile in a whole bunch of basically tissue, and that's not going to be good for that foliage to be squished like that. Now here, some of this stuff I will have to kind of let that dry so that I can paint it with my object source lighting, so that if you see it looking a little bit different, like, wait a minute, some of that foliage has been painted with the fluorescent green, well, that was just me doing that after the fact. So we're just gonna piling this stuff up here, trying to mask all those edges to the best that I can. Is it going to be perfect every single time? It is not. Even like here, I'm so tempted to not really do very much of it, but there's just going to be a line there. I don't have to do it too much because I could just use some foliage there. Okay. So again, that changes the color a little bit. I also needed a second layer over there. Do I have, oh, I said big old gap right over here. Like so. Couple more piles of my earth texture mixed with a whole bunch of paint. We're getting there. I see a gap over here that we're going to cover. So even right now, those just as they are, they blended more than they were just a few minutes ago. So that is already an improvement. And okay. Actually, what I think I'm going to do is let this have a minute or two to set up. Okay, I'm going to, let it have at least maybe 5-10 minutes or so to set up. And then I'll be doing some foliage. Boy. I'm really tempted. Nope. No, we're going to do this instead. We're going to stick with our original plan, which is to take our Luke's APS glue here. And I might actually mix some paint in it. We've done that before, remember? We've done that before. I'm not quite so... Not going to thin this down quite so much. Okay, so we've got basically glue with color. And we've got a bunch of our flocks here. And I'm just going to focus on a few areas right around the girls here. So now I'm adding some glue here. Okay, I'm going to get this where you can see it. I might even zoom in a bit. I want you to be able to see what's happening here. Just need to get better handhold on this. So this is not so much filling a gap. This is getting genuine glue in here. Some actual real glue. And we'll do this one right here. And as much as I want to get some flower tufts and stuff around it, I also want to drop a couple of leaves in there maybe. And then we're going to follow that up with some of our, our Luke's APS material here. And that is, yeah, so look at what we have here. I'm going to, again, change the focus here. Look at that. Now, yeah, I can't tell. Look at the difference from this to this, yeah, that's not too shabby. Let's see if we can't continue on with this now. Let's do one up here. I don't want to smush the paste too much. And this one's not going to get so much in the way of leaves. It'll just get some of this ground cover here. And look at this, I might even just toss a rock in there. There's a couple of smaller rocks. Now, even some of this texture will come up, but now, yeah, all of that, to me, looking much better. So once again, we're going to give ourselves some glue up here. Back here too. And the hope is that by virtue of blending in the glue with the paint and the paste and everything else, that stuff like this will just stick right there. Let's get another, maybe even a smaller rock here. And then some of our texture. I always have a link to the Luke's APS stuff and, well, to the Green Stuff World site, so you can find that. The Woodland Scenic stuff, I just get it on Amazon. Yeah, there we go. Not too shabby there. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here because go over here. Again, this is our glue. And this is where now we start to mask. The roller didn't necessarily take very well right there. Yeah. And I think we'll do this one right here with our last bit in this segment, and then we'll pick it up again in just a bit. Because remember, we still got to add tufts and a whole bunch of other things. I am just trying to, oh, look at this. So I'm going to take my glue here, really get a bunch of glue in there, and I'm just going to find some big old pieces of, oh, look at that, big old rock there. Look, there's another one there. Maybe some smaller rocks. And then we'll get into our material here. Maybe even a leaf or two. And we're really getting into our blending of our materials. Now over here, look at this. This is still just, it's glue, but it's got paint in it. Give ourselves a rock, and again, just throw some texture down here. It really does. Yeah, that is, that's doing the job that we needed it to do. So we're going to get some more glue out here, and we'll finish up these other ones, then we'll get into our tufts and flowers and other fun stuff like that, and we'll do that next. So before I get too far along with all of the Luke's APS landscape stuff, we need to do some of our tufts and other foliage type things. Now there's a couple of areas that I'm targeting here. See that big old gap right in there? Remember we were talking about, well, that's where foliage is going to go. Well, let's do that here. So we're just going to, this is one of our gamer's grass chunks. We're just going to pop that back there. And look at that. Hey, let's see, it's neat to even hang it over the edge like that. I believe, remember if you haven't seen it already, the tutorial on the, oh, what was that we did? It was our terrain piece, and we had some of that kind of hanging off the edge. Now, I think either here or here. I'm going to target right there with that. And look at the little, nice little, almost a mini diorama that makes. Just, it's like a diorama within a diorama. We don't want to do too many of these guys. Yeah, let's do another one. I think this is a good spot for it right here. And this is a big old chunk right here. We could cut these down, but I'm thinking I want them to be, yeah, that's a nice big old chunk there. And I'm going to target another spot here. Maybe not one that's quite so big. Yeah, so this one I'm actually going to tear that one. Oh, but these Gamer's Grass ones, you do want to be a little bit more ginger with them. Okay, I'm going to stick that one here. And then this piece is going to sit right over here. And I don't want to go too crazy with the tufts. You can start putting too many of those. Gratuitous grass tufts. We don't want gratuitous grass tufts. Okay. So have those. The next thing that we want to try, again, these are from Green Stuff World. Here we are going to rip out a few of these. And actually, this might be the first time I can actually try them at their full height, which would be very interesting. I have not actually, well, not necessarily their total full height, but pretty close to it. And this is the area that I'm thinking right in here. I could poke some holes in there, but I'm just going to go, I'm going to go with glue here. And we're going to tighten up this bundle. I'm just going to stick that right there. Spread it out a bit. I might even go in after here with a little bit of glue and have it sort of sit up against the edge. I could even take a smaller sprig of this here. So I just cut it down, and that's going to maybe fill in a little bit of the gap here. So see, now we've got a few different heights of it. That's not a bad idea either. In fact, we are going to do a similar thing with that right over here. I'm kind of targeting this little gap here. Got a small little bit of it, little glue, in that goes. So I just kind of put that right in there. I've got a few other areas that might be interesting, or some taller. Maybe even here. You know what? I'm going to go up to the second level here. I already have something that can help support it. As in some of my tufts there. Might even rip out a little bit more of a tuft and throw that over here on the other side again, just for a little bit of support. So there's another nice old tuft, and a couple around here I'm thinking. So I'm going to go with one here. What I want to do is grab this pokey thing here and just kind of stab some holes in this if I can. And I've got my little bundle here. some glue. Let's see if we can't really shove this thing down into that hole. That's not working. Hole just needed to be bigger, I guess. More into that. I had it in there, but then we got ourselves a piece of our backdrop stuck to it. It happens. I want another big sprig of it. And this is a fairly large sprig right here. And there's a gap down in here that it would be neat if it could go in there. Now, it might interfere with that lady over here. But I'm just gonna chuck some glue there. Might even actually take some of that down. So I made a little modification to the landscape there. Okay. That's good. That is what I'm looking for. So now that kind of falls behind her a little bit. That's good. And I'm gonna call that it with the sprigs for right now. My next thing I'm going to try and find is got a few of these little lavender flowers here. I've got to be judicious with them. Don't want to use those too carefully. And they got to be sort of be on the bottom level here. Oh, you know what? I was about here. I got the yellow ones too. I'm just going to do a couple of the purple ones here. Spread around. Just to lend a little color. Okay. Again, some color. Maybe one here on the back. And I'm just going to take this one. We'll rip it in half. Well, not half. But there's a smaller one that's going to go there. The other piece is going to go there. Now, there is nothing here. Now we have a little something there. So now you can see we've got hints of a couple different colors of green. Let's see what we can do here with some flowers. And these are your daffodils here. These again are from Warlord. And these are, it's almost more of a, it's, okay, so they are tufts. I was thinking it was almost more of a sheet of flowers. And I'm thinking of just maybe building on some of my grass tufts here. I'm going to put a flower tuft over here. Almost tempted to throw, there's just nothing here. I'm not quite sure why, but something makes me want to toss a flower tuft right up in there. These have some stickiness to them, so I guess I don't really need to be doing the glue. See how that kind of hangs over a bit there? Yeah, so these guys definitely have some stickiness to them. So again, we're trying to build some colorful things. Oh, definitely something here. I think that's not a bad plan. Different colors, lots of different textures. We definitely have to get some of these yellow flowers by her right here because, well, she has all those yellow flowers right there. Press this down. Spread it out. Okay. There's a whole big area behind her here. I'm just trying to quite literally drop this down into here. So now that gap doesn't look so quite so egregious. So we're, in a way, we're kind of sculpting with our foliage here a bit. And I'll just chuck another small one right over here. And I'm thinking even up here, I've got to do some kind of either tufts or some. I know it's weird to have flowers growing out of stone like that, but I think we need to march our color that far up towards the top level, maybe. Maybe for now, that's going to be it with the tufts. Unless, you know what? I'm actually going to take a couple of grass tufts here and throw some of those. Okay. So just up against there, a couple of grass tufts. Now, let's just, for now, set the tufts aside and let's start to do some more stuff with our Luke's APS ground cover. I also have a little bit of this. This is the woodland scenic stuff here. Now, hopefully, yeah, okay, good. I wasn't sure if I had actually kept my glue out of the line of fire here, and I think I have. So this has been thinned down a bit. Now all I need to do is just find out where my ground covers went. That one's just, that was more of our landscape, our terrain one over there. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Just gonna throw in some of our glue. Still got some of the paint in there. Gonna cover up some of this area. With a bit of our couple different types of ground cover here. Some of this. Some of this type. And even some of our green flock over here. Because we really haven't added that very much. As much as I love all of the textures and colors and tones from the Luke's APS stuff, I need to make sure that there's just some straight up greenery here. And I'm even going to paint over a touch of her, and now we're just going to go right at that with that lighter green flock. It's also going to get down to that area there because the super glue is still there. We got this little ridge here. That's going to get a touch of both of these, so some of that, and then back in with our lighter green flock there. starting to look that much more overgrown. I had really thought about throwing a tuft back there too, and then I thought against that. And see, this we'll cover that up just a little bit. Just a little bit. And here, let's go. Some of our greenish flock up here. Could even press it down into that if you really wanted to. And remember, there's a decent portion of this stuff that will just kind of blow away. And yes, it's almost as if I'm kind of gluing over stuff that was already glued on here. Let's just drop this down in here. Of course, the fans are, there's so many fans on in this room, it's kind of getting blown around all over the place. Yeah, that's not going to be anywhere near quite that covered up. It's just is what it is. Sometimes you just have to put it on there and then let some of it fall away. The other thing you can do is have some kind of a little container or whatever to maybe grab some of that as you let the glue dry, and then when you want to take the stuff off, I'm just gonna throw some, if I can, some leaf piles in here. Those will definitely stick there eventually. So I get some of that texture, and then some of this. Now, as I look at the time here, I'm going to go up here now and get some of this, because you can, you know what I'm doing around here. I did want to show you. So this is, does a couple of things here. Gives me a chance to maybe throw a leaf or two up here. Again, those are just done with the Green Stuff World leaf cutter. So a little bit of that texture here. And then some of our greenery. You can also have this greenery climb up the side here or be up on top there like moss. And we will be doing that. Actually, what the heck? I'll just do it right now. You can see it right up there. A bit of it here. And maybe even along here. Just why not? Maybe have that hang over the edge too. And I'm just going to go straight up with the green flock here. Let that cover over here too. Okay, now it really is going to be over. And in the lieu of ivy, sometimes I just did that, but we still want to try those plants, the vellum plants there from Wicked Elf. I still think this is the first real chance that I've had to use those vines, and I just want to give them a try. That maybe I need a different type of structure to wrap them around. It could be a little bit more difficult given the fluted columns here. I might not have as much to glue it to. Something I might have to consider. Okay, so yeah, nice. Look at that. See how it starts to separate my layers. And I knew that this is something that I really was going to do. So that now you see why I didn't go crazy painting all this, because you can't really paint this kind of texture in. That would be really tough. So we got 3 levels here. We can see this will give us a little bit of distinction between those layers. Just throw a little bit of our stuff here, maybe a couple of leaves. Gets in there. And then on to our green flock. Now I'm just gonna give myself a little more of my glue here. Where did that go? And yes, this doesn't necessarily have quite so much of the paint in it anymore, but here, let's get a little bit of my water into this, thin that down. We've got a couple more of our surfaces to do like this, and I'm going to get a little bit up there. Maybe a bit of overgrowth here too. It does give a reason why there's maybe some kind of tufts or whatever up here, because it's, again, overgrown. It also lends maybe a little bit extra stability, because now there you got some glue along those edges. If there's any gaps there too, because I mean it was Sculpey after all, and sometimes it's not, doesn't have a perfect edge. That helps to almost give it a little more support, like a little extra glue. So you could do something like this. Have it run down the side of that. Just gonna toss this at it, and good enough. Here's definitely another area where we could do some more. Now I'm going to wait till that, yeah, either glue that in or see what that looks like in there. I almost tempted to grab a tuft to throw in there, but I'm thinking, no, we'll let this do its thing. You get a little more of our greenery in there. Now, at a certain point, it comes a little bit hard for me to tell what's going on here. There's just so much stuff on here. As far as loose ground cover and everything else. So what I'll do is I'm just going to go around, do the rest of these nooks and crannies that aren't terribly interesting, and we'll basically, our final little thing, what we're going to do is see what happens with the ivy and see if that works. Basically, okay, let's say disaster scenario, right? It just fails horribly, doesn't work at all. What do you do? Well, I'll just take this green flock and glue it to where maybe the glue, kind of got messed up the paint job a little bit. So it'll be none the worse for wear. It'll all be good. I'm going to throw a little bit of that in here too. So you can see we got plenty of colors going on. We got some extra rocks in here now. I'm just kind of excited to see it like this. There's been a lot of work on this, and especially just even the painting of the figures themselves. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and it's just kind of nice now to see it come together like this. I mean, is it the original vision? It's pretty darn close to the original vision. I'll say that. Okay. Yeah, we are good to go then, I think. Yeah, what we're going to do is see what we can do here with these guys. There we go. So we got to paint these, and then we're going to glue those on, and we'll see what happens. We'll do that next. Okay, so I tried to make these things work, and it just, as you can see, they just kind of tore, and that, yeah, that was not very successful. Okay, so we're not going to be using those. There are some other potential ways of doing vines that I'll show you. As I look at this, I don't even want to do that. I'm not really interested in that anymore. I realize that's kind of too much stuff going on. However, what we also need to do here is the final little thing is just some painting exercise. We've got some glow to do right here. So I'm going to see if we have enough light here. Let me see if I can get my lights in the right spot here. I'm going to make sure I've got the correct focus for you. There's a little bit of our fluorescent green. Let's get these things out of the way. And it has to be a really light touch here. And I'm in a really light touch. And the flock is also going to be very absorbent. So this will not be the easiest maneuver. It's one thing to paint things like static grass, but painting stuff like this is an entirely different matter. Also, even though I tried to blow off as much of the excess flock as I could, there was no guarantee all that was coming off of there. So we're just trying to integrate everything here. All of a sudden now this stuff looks a little bit less like foreign material that was just sort of added on after the fact, and now it looks like it's been there all along, or at least that's the hope. That's the goal anyway. Not quite sure if you can see exactly what's happening there, but it is starting to get that glow on it. Definitely starting to pick up a little bit of a glow. Now, is that an... Okay. Just shoot that right off of there. Again, I'm hoping you can see this. So the other material that I was thinking about doing was... It's the same kind of viney material that you saw me use. I've used it as tree roots in other dioramas. And it's kind of this... I don't even know what it is. What would you say, in real life? I have no idea what that stuff is, but I've used it as tree roots on my ground. And the idea is I would take some of my cut leaves and I would stick those onto those roots once I've kind of wound them around. The disadvantage is I would have to paint those first because they're very much brown. They are not terribly green. Speaking of green, I think we're starting to get a decent greenish glow on this stuff. Again, not the easiest task in the world because it is sort of absorbent. You can see how we're picking up a lot of junk in here. Now you know why we have beat up number 8 rounds for just these type of occasions. Now the glue is definitely dry because there's been an entire day in between the exercises here just to make sure. I didn't want things falling off or anything like that. So I think we're doing reasonably well here. I'm going to get some of that greenish glow up here too. Maybe extend that out a little further. Okay. Do I feel the need to do any? No, I might just hit this a little bit. I'm thinking I might put some more leaves here around the edges of this. And we'll do that in a second. We'll break out our materials again. Okay, I think we've got it. I think that's as much as I want to do with that greenish glow. Any more, starting to carry that out a little too far. good enough. Maybe a little hint of it here on the floor again. Now you know why we... Look at this. I painted all that pattern there. It ended up being covered up by that and now covered up by paint. So another reason why, and as I look at this just from a little bit of a distance here, I'm really glad that I didn't get too crazy about putting in lots of colors and other such things. All right, we'll just get some things out of the way here. We'll bring back some of our flock. We've got some of our leaves out here. And maybe even just a little bit of our Luke's APS material. So sorry to switch gears on you like this. I had kind of something entirely different planned out for this segment, and that did not pan out the way it was supposed to. And I did actually want you guys to see that, and we're going to use, for adhesive here, we're going to use the Luke's APS. I sometimes prefer you guys to see things go a little bit wonky because not everything works the way you hope it does. And the only real way to see that in action is just to see it fail. And that definitely did not work the way I had intended it to whatsoever. Now we're going to thin down our glue here a little bit and just taking some of my water over here. We're thinning down this glue because I almost want it to kind of seep underneath the ends of these columns here. Get my leaves. And I don't know if it's right here. Okay, good. I think you can see that fairly well. And see how that glue is just, it slips underneath there? Couple of things that's going to do. It's, wow, I can get a decent amount of the brush underneath that column. And that's another reason why I'm doing this, because it's going to give it some more support. There's another column over here that needs it. Oh yeah, look at how that just rolls right underneath that column. Let's give it a couple of leaves here. A couple of leaves over there. And then a touch of our ground cover. I'm looking around for another area I would really like to get some back here. It's going to be hard to reach, although you can see it, which is good. So again, that goes right underneath there. And I'm hoping that at least some of these leaves will adhere. Not all of them are. Sometimes, like I said, it can be a little bit comical to get these things to stick. I could even water this glue down a little bit more. And it's just like how it sank underneath the column. It kind of sank underneath these leaves. Just grab a touch of my green flock, just dust over the top. I don't want to do too much here because because there's glue on those leaves now. It's going to impact those. So this column is going to get some. There we are. And I'm going to add a bit more over here too. That's just going to be some of your Luke's APS. Let's get if I can, just a couple of leaves on here. There. Okay, that's good. So this was the other thing, in lieu of, where's my green foliage here? Push those aside. in lieu of what we originally wanted to do, we're going to switch gears here. Can you see this? Okay, we're just going to dot some glue on here. I used to do this all the time on dioramas. I'm just going to tilt this over here, but we're just going to see, look at that. We're going to dust some of this on here. See how that stays behind? A little bit of a leafy texture on there. So that's what we're going to do now here. Some things like that. It helps to give it a bit of an overgrown look. That's why I wasn't super broken up about the vines not working out, because I had a default mechanism here. Remember we did this on, I think it was the last terrain video we did this too. Remember it was following in all of the cracks of the stones and some of the bigger gaps. Again, just a little application of glue here. Take our greenery and we'll just add it right to that. Not too shabby. So we've got that. I'm just looking to make sure we've got things pretty much taken care of in most areas. I see some gaps over here that we could have some greenery in, just to make those a little bit more appealing. Like right over here. That's just a little bit plain. Where's some leaves? Then on to our sepia, especially here in this ground cover part there. And then what's left of my greenery, sneak its way in here. Okay. Gonna throw a little bit of that here, just to have it as a kind of a backdrop to the green that's in her hair. Okay. I'm just gonna grab some more of my green flock here. With those columns attached, I gotta be a little bit careful here, because they will snag on one of the lights and just be sheared right off, and that's not gonna be a good thing. All right, we've got that a little more filled in. There was another area that I was like right here. Heck, I'm tempted to even throw a little bit of a tuft in there. We'll start off with a little bit of our ground cover first. Maybe toss a leaf or two. Follow that up with a little more greenery here. One last area. Right in here. Yeah, you can see that. Now just keep that simple. We'll just dump some of our green there. Okay, so I think we are pretty well set here. I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for supporting the stuff on the Patreon page. I know that the filming schedule has been a little bit weird. There's been a lot of crazy things that have happened just in the last 3-4 weeks that have forced me to alter filming schedules. So I apologize if I can't always do exactly the thing that I want to do when I want to do it. That's just kind of how life goes, unfortunately. Here, let's back this out a little more. Can really see all those nifty colors on there. We've got some greenery on our columns, and that's enough. I'm not going to do any more. That is more than enough. We got leaves on there now. So thanks again, everybody. I'll catch you again on the next Building Dioramas episode. And until then, thank you very much.